We're going to get this work session started tonight. This is October 31st, 2016. It is a few minutes after 4:30, 4:33. We're in the Thomas J. Smith Council Chambers. I'm going to have to, no, I'll get one later, but I'm going to have to excuse myself, but I did want to say a statement before I left. A few weeks ago, I made comments in regards to our city manager and comparing him to other employees. I made a comment in regards to grass being cut. I want to first off say I don't think anybody ever makes any statements or does anything with the intent of trying to be misunderstood. When I went back through and I read the statements, I could see how somebody could take it that way. I would like to say that I've been in this town all my life for 47 years, so I would like to think that people know me so that when I do say something that maybe some people find that just doesn't go and coincide with where I normally come from, where I normally stand, that they would give me the benefit of the doubt. For those that can't give me the benefit of the doubt, I understand. From sitting from this seat, we need to be mindful, and I try to think that I do a pretty good job, but I say a lot, and because I am a loquacious type of individual, that I'm going to have a higher risk of saying something that may catch somebody wrong, and I did that 2 weeks ago. So again, for any city employees that feel like they're less than, I'm with you. You're still going to get the same thing out of Shane. I may say something wrong again, but I'd like to think that my actions will show you that I'm for the little guy. That's me. I'm for you. I stand with anybody that feels like they need representation or that their voices are being heard. So again, for those that are mad at me, all right. But it's not going to help you live any longer, and it's not going to do anything for your health. So I would encourage you to let's keep working together and try to make Burlington a great place to live, work, and play. So again, I apologize, but we can get more done together than we can working against each other. Thank you for your time. I'm going to turn it over to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Amen. Thank you, Mayor. Because the mayor is leaving and Councilwoman Wilson also has to leave, we're going to make some changes in the agenda for tonight. On the discussion items, the item of discussing ordinance regarding fire pits and Otter Island leases, we're going to move to the next work session, which would be 2 weeks from today. So if you're here waiting for those discussions, it'd probably be just best if you came back in 2 weeks for the fire pit discussion, the Otter Island leases. All right, so I think first of all, if you folks are ready, we'll go with the snowball presentation and start with that.
Hi. We'll only keep you a couple of hours. I'm kidding. We limited it. 3 of us are going to speak tonight, and we did limit it to keep it really short. I have to apologize. I'm Linda Hild. I'm the Vice President interim of Snowball's Business Operations. One of you I know because he taught me in school, but we're not going to discuss who that is because I don't want to age anybody.
That was just a couple years ago.
Yeah, not long ago.
Yeah.
I don't know the rest of you, and I apologize for that. Can I get your names?
Yeah. Annie Wilson.
Tim Scott.
Jim
I
Davidson.
do know you.
Jim Davidson.
Bob Fleming.
Jim Furno.
Okay, and I've seen your picture in the paper. We're gonna do a little Christmas theme tonight. We're gonna do past, present, and future. And so Diane LaRue Chubb is our secretary, and she's gonna talk a little bit about Snowball Past. I promise we're keeping this to like 2 to 3 minutes a person, so we'll be out of your hair real shortly.
Diane LaRue Chubb, and I have been a member of Snowball since it started in 1993 as a fundraiser for the American Red Cross in Des Moines County, in the area. And it stayed that way, and it had continued to assist the American Red Cross for any number of years, although we incorporated in March of 1995 with the state of Iowa. And at that point, we no longer were per se a Red Cross fundraiser. We were Snowball, Inc. And then in May of 1998, we filed for and received from the federal government status as a 501c3 for our event, which, as I understand it, is fairly rare. There are very few 501c3s in the as events. We, with our money that we raise, we donate to various other 501c3s or other agencies that are like schools and so forth. In 2009, and 2008, we had that rather notorious flood here in 2008, and there was a lot of money donated. It was private donations. It went to the United Way in a way that needed to be administered through an agency, and they asked Snowball to help them administer it. And as such, we were helpful, I guess you would say, in distributing money to people in Des Moines, Louisa, and Henry County in Iowa, and to Henderson and Hancock counties in Illinois. And the amount of money that went through us was in the hundreds of thousands, maybe not up to $1 million, but we did donate a lot of money. And we had a review board. And so that was one of the things that we did as a 501c3 that other agencies might not have been able to do. And we continue to this time, and we've donated on our own from money that we have taken in. I won't say tens of thousands, I would say we've donated over $100,000 to different agencies and organizations, either through their volunteering to help with us or their direct donations. And we support a lot of community and local and area agencies in a small way, but eventually it adds up. So that's why we're here. And today, our president is going to talk to us. And unless you have a question or anything like that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks. My name is Josh Smith. I've been a board member for Snowball for approximately 3 years right now. I have been in the rodeo industry, though, helping up since I was about 4 years old. So I've got about 24 years of rodeo background with me right now. I got that knowledge and introduced into rodeo from my father here. I want to take a few minutes to talk to you guys about Snowball 2017. We're going on 25 years. Kind of like Diane said, though, 1 year we did not get to have our event, so it's 25 years, 24 events that we're going to be doing. Our 3-night event is going to start Thursday, March 9th, and it runs through Saturday, March 11th of 2017. Thursday night is our family night. We're going to be doing something right now. We've never done this before. We're going to be representing Burlington Strong. And with Mayor McCampbell, we've talked to him. He's going to come into our event. He's going to do opening prayer for us and ceremony. Also, we're going to get to the Maple Leaf Center and Otto Leopold after-school events. We're going to be giving those folks free tickets to try to get themselves and their families into our event for free this year. Thursday night, like I said, it's a big, big family night for us. Other nights, though, we do other events. We've done cancer night, we've done military night, we do all sorts of different events every night that we have our event. So with Thursday being all about Burlington, Burlington Strong, we look for your guys' input on what we can do for our event and to make it stronger for the community. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
A little bit of a height issue there. Okay, well, I told you I'm Linda Hild. I am the interim vice president of business operations with Snowball. I'm also the vice president of Case Pine Community Credit Union. A little bit of my background, I joined the board 3 years ago. This will be my 4th event. I have a master's in business, but my undergraduate's in marketing, and so I sort of came on to the event to help with some of the marketing and transitioned a little bit into the budget and sort of redefining the presence of Snowball in the community. Prior to just a coffee over a table, I really wasn't even aware of what Snowball is, and that's kind of what we're experiencing now in the community is either you know what Snowball is or you don't. And so we're going to do some outreach to try and get our statement out there a little bit, show that we do give back to the community. I know this year we helped purchase the new flag for the fire department. We've done several things for the Burlington Police Department and then smaller organizations in the community. But as we look to the future, we want to make sure we continue to provide the highest quality of show for professional bull riders here in Burlington. I'm going to mess this up, FPB bull riders. I get that wrong every time. We have in the last few years attracted FPB bull riders, which are national bull riders who are ranked in the circuit in the top 10. They're coming to our show. They're kicking off their season here in Burlington, Iowa. We're seeing an increased presence in hotel bookings and things like that. So we want to make sure we provide the highest quality of show for them, provide a venue for the Cowboys to obviously earn a living, but most of all, to provide a positive feedback for our community to these people that come in and see us in the middle of March, which isn't always our most attractive month, to be honest. Could be sunny, could be snowy, you never know. We talk about, well, we even had, I think, flood one year, so it's a hodgepodge down there in March. We do face many challenges as we look to the future, none as big as the auditorium itself. As you all know, there are only so many seats you can sell. And in our economy, there are only so much you can charge for those seats before you start to diminish what you're selling. But we are confident that by providing an entertaining show at a reasonable cost, supporting our community and those that work in it, and holding ourselves as a board to a high standard, that we can be champions of the show and champions of the community. After meeting with Shane, Mayor Campbell, he asked if we'd just come down and reintroduce ourselves to the board. We've had some history with prior board members. We don't really have any history with you all, so we want to invite you to our Thursday night event. We'd like you to participate in that. We're all very passionate about Burlington. We understand, and we've talked at our own board meetings about some of the challenges the community's facing in itself and some of the things it's going through, and kind of came up with this hashtag Burlington Strong theme. And we're working with Pritchard Broadcasting to maybe even sell T-shirts the month prior to the event that just say hashtag Burlington Strong, and get as many people down there on Thursday night, one, to see an amazing bull riding event. It is so much fun when those bulls just kind of like hit up against the gates and you take a step back, or the dirt flies into the second row of seats, which is always entertaining. But I'd love to see you guys down there. If you want to like go out and have coffee or meet, I have very flexible hours. I would like spend hours talking about Snowball and how we can partner with Burlington and make this better. Do you have any questions? Yeah, I did really good. I stayed right on like 12 minutes.
Thank you, Linda. Can we designate which one of us is going to be on the bull?
Unfortunately, we don't do celebrity. I have 24 books of like all the prior things we've done, and we did do celebrity bull riding, but there's this thing called insurance nowadays that restricts what you can and can't do, or I would be nominating my own people on those bulls.
Or intelligence.
Oh, thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again for giving us some of your time.
God bless you guys.
Do the treasurer's report first. Let's do the treasurer's report first.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Snowball folks. You're free to leave unless you want to stay on here all the rest of this that we're doing tonight.
Does it look bad if you run?
No,
Oh, no.
I invite you to.
It looks bad if you stay.
We're going to go to the treasurer's report and then move to Travis with his report. Okay,
Okay.
I have to find mine, excuse me.
Again, there's two treasurer's reports in the packet.
Page 82.
I looked at it all.
You okay? No? Not yet. Okay.
Okay. So there's two treasurer's reports in the packet, June 30th again. The auditors were here last week. We think these numbers should be good. We
Good.
haven't had any adjustments from them, so it'll be final as soon as we get the audit report, but, so general fund's looking good. It's like at 14.4%.
14.4.
14.4.
Wow. Yay.
So, yeah, so all's good there.
Refreshes, where were we 5 years ago?
3%.
Yeah,
3%. And now we're 14.4.
14.4,
Wow.
yeah.
Thank you. Way to
Yep.
go, council.
And really, it's, if you were to count it the way that we were doing it then, we'd have a little bit higher balance, wouldn't we? If you include some other funds, or, I don't know if it, well, maybe that's not a fair thing to say. but-
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the hotel
Right.
motel is, and there's a couple other things that wrap up into that.
Yeah, the other things are minimal.
But if you were to make the strict comparison for where the general fund truly was at that point, it was a little bit worse than that. But yeah, if you look at this, and Bob mentioned that, I made a comment last week at,
Chamber
the
meeting,
chamber meeting.
Yeah,
which I wish I had recorded.
yeah, me too.
And I'm not gonna make the same statement, cause
Oh,
I
go
can't
ahead.
do it, but, you know, we have, over the course of the last 4.5 years,
Yeah.
went from a position where we had to do a short-term line of credit to make sure that we had cash flow, to make payroll.
Payroll.
We were within $50,000 in June of 2012 of having to access that line of credit. And if you look at the year-end financials here, we were at 17 million cash in the bank.
Yes.
That's a phenomenal change just in that piece. We had $8.5 million of deficit accounts at that point. If you look through the accounts where we still have deficits, there's about a $40,000 deficit in the debt service fund, 120,000 or so in golf course, and is it 190,000 or so in Recplex? I'm just going
it's-
off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
it's 190,000. We're a little under $400,000.
So if you look at those three accounts where we have outstanding deficits that aren't projects that are ongoing, because some of the other, if you look, there's a couple others,
And that's timing issues.
those, the rest of those are ongoing projects. Those are the ones where we have outstanding deficits still to alleviate. So we've gone from $8.5 million down to 400,000. Our cash balance in the general fund has gone from 600,000 to 2.5 million. We had set up originally a goal of trying to hit a 15% cash balance in 5 years, which at the time that we were doing that, in January of 2013 was for the FY18 budget. We should be on track to hit that 15%. I don't think we're gonna get there this year, although we certainly could,
Close. Good.
because we're sitting at 14.5, 4.4, 14.4.
14.4.
I think we may end up short of it yet this year, but, we have done a phenomenal job on staying true, and that doesn't happen without a council who's working to make sure that you stay consistent and work on those as goals, having those goals out there that you want to hit and consistently moving towards them. But we're now getting to a spot, well, where we can start to transition into what are some of the what-ifs of what we can afford to do. Which will be when Travis comes up, but we can let you finish for what you have for the other report too, or?
Okay, then September's treasury report is in here. And, I mean, I looked through it as I'm compiling it, and there's nothing unusual. I mean, some of the things that have deficits right now is because we do transfers twice a year, December and June, so. And our property tax money is recorded in October, so we get our big payment for the September property taxes, so. And if you guys had any questions going through, looking through it.
Well, I don't, but can I comment on what Mr. Furneaux is saying here? I think it's great, and maybe we pat ourselves on the back just a little bit, but we're not done. And we can't quit, and we can't sit back and say, oh, we've made it. And so now what can we spend money on? We're just not in a position we can do that. And I want to keep that in our front of our thinking until, who knows when, 2020 maybe, or 20-something? Anyway, so it's all great, it's all good. I'm so thankful that we've made it this far, but we're not done.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Travis, are you ready?
All right, you had within your packet a set of sheets, but you also have now in front of you the similar sheets. You made a couple of revisions to
There's
this.
a couple revisions that I would suggest, there's a couple of revisions I'd suggest using the paper copy or viewing up on the main screen.
For those of you out there who never heard Travis, this is Travis Squires.
What's your role with us, Travis?
I have worked with the city as a financial consultant since, let's see, back in 2010, but our firm has been with the city for a long period of time. So I've been the primary financial consultant for the city since 2010, when we kind of started unwinding a few of the things that were going on, addressing some of the rating agency concerns, taking members of the city to Chicago to discuss information with the rating agency. So it gives me good, a good feeling to sit here and see how far you guys have come as well. To echo Jim's, nothing you've done has been, going over the top to, necessarily build up a cash war chest to, just because you like sitting on money. These are adequate reserves the city needs to operate. You guys set reasonable goals and you followed through on that. This has probably been the most exciting piece of presentation stuff we've been able to put together from the standpoint of more what ifs, as you've kind of gotten to yourself where your debt structure is manageable. You'll see we'll have some conversations regarding lowering tax rates, potentially releasing some tax increment financing valuation to allow the city to have more dollars in the general fund. Conversations that even 5 years ago, I mean, those were, those aren't going to happen for a while. But, really, you guys have done a nice job, so hats off to you as a council. And also, to the citizens of your community. It's not an easy thing to hear, well, we're cutting this, we're not doing this project, we're going to delay this, do this, raise taxes to fund our current cost of government. And, hopefully, like I say, a great place to live, work, and play, greater Burlington for you guys. So nice work, council. I'm going to try to move through this quickly. If you read your council packet information, you'll know that it was heavy on numbers. And I did put some charts in, so that's a real stretch for me. I can do numbers all day, but looking at some charts, ultimately, this is kind of the brainchild, I guess, of working with Jim to just start modeling out some what ifs, as far as what are some future projects, and not just 5 years. Now, kind of expanding more of a 10-year vision for what the city could look like on some of the capital projects, as well as some budget planning. So. Feel free to interject at any time if you have questions. I'll try to move kind of quickly through it. But as we're working through, just going to hit some overview on capital improvement planning. We'll talk about your debt outstanding. We'll look at new projects that would have what we call debt service levy support, new projects that would have TIF revenue support, and then new projects through the flood mitigation, which will be funded through a sales tax TIF or a local option sales tax intercept that's done by the state. So you guys were awarded $26.2 million of revenue over a 20-year period to receive. So looking at the flood mitigation projects and how those will be funded, and then a few what I'll call output metrics as far as valuation and debt limit are concerned, and then other considerations, questions as we get there. So Jim, if you have any other opening comments on this? Okay.
No, and the one thing I will say is there were several projects that are going to be listed in here. There was, within geo bonding, I wanted to be able to look at hitting one of the major goals the council's had, and that's discussion of doing Cascade Bridge. So we tried to figure out if there was a way to fit that in without compromising a longer-term goal of getting our debt service levy reduced from the $3.80 level to $3. That would put us more in line with what the average, if you look at the largest 24 communities, that's really where when you compare our property tax levy against the largest 24 communities, that's where we are higher than what the norm is. And within the TIF, I wanted to model what are some different projects. There are things that I've thought about or heard people talk about, and they're as much as anything else to get a discussion started. So as he goes through this, it's not designed to say these are the ones that this is the first time this has come to the council, especially with the TIF projects to be thought about.
So I tried to make a hint that this is sample only, and nothing officially adopted, so when we get to that piece. But kind of a good review, is we're capital improvement planning. There's really 3 parameters that we've kind of worked from. One is a debt limit margin. The city's internal goal of staying at not more than 70% of your constitutional debt limit. And to kind of step back a few years ago, again, you guys were above that, so we've been having to pay off debt, not issue as much new debt as a city. That was another one of the things that was inherited, by a lot of the members of this council as well. Debt service levy that has been at around $3.80 over the last couple years, and looking at some adjustments to that potentially going forward. Again, that's capital project related, so you can continue a higher level of capital projects and keep your debt service levy a certain amount, or you'll be able to look at what I have as adopted and see, well, would this amount work? And if so, it would show the ability to lower your debt service levy. Working at your debt structure and always identifying project cost and payments up front before approving projects, not getting into a situation where you're backloading any debt. And then some other goals that we've already hit on, talking about releasing TIF valuation to the general fund and to the other taxing entities that the residents of the city of Burlington pay taxes to. Ultimately, the majority of your growth has been in those urban, what we call urban renewal areas, and that growth has helped that revenue stream increase, but at the same time, your general fund budget growth has been at a much slower level. So talking about potentially releasing some of that valuation back to support your general fund and add dollars to your overall general budget. So those are some goals that kind of were on the onset of this modeling. So what you have outstanding, here's all the tiny numbers. As always, lots of tiny numbers on the page. To just kind of hit, this was just your, by series designation repayment structure. Nobody in the public can read any of this stuff. You guys can probably barely read it on your sheets of paper. But ultimately, I'm going to put a chart up. Ultimately, to kind of lay the groundwork, you do have debt outstanding, and the principal amount is approximately $33.6 million. After paying interest, it's just under $38 million of total debt payments that will go out through 2031. Those aren't level, they go down over time, as you can see in the structure, and there's a chart that'll pop up here in a minute. You do pay that from other sources as well. So out of the 38 million roughly of total payments, about 16 million are being paid from either tax increment financing revenues, sewer revenues, local option sales tax, and other sources not within the debt service levy. To put it in a chart form, the debt service levy is the light gray at the bottom. You see there's 2 axes on this. The squiggly line that goes down over time relates to your overall debt service levy rate. That's charted on the right axis. The left axis then has your total payments. So you can see approximately $5 million of debt payments this year and for the next couple years. And then you see it falls off pretty dramatically. This was, as we've discussed, we've known about this. One of the things you've been managing through is you've tried to take on a limited amount of projects. And one of the reasons that the Cascade Bridge project has been kind of pushed off or talked about being moved down the schedule. So new projects with debt service levy support, again, lots of numbers on a page. Looking at different projects, and I know for, the people who have really good eyesight and can read all those tiny numbers up there, I'm just gonna give you kind of an overview. And it looked at different projects each year. So you see projects from 2017 out to 2028. Those projects include the PD building, runway, street projects in 2018, fire department projects, streets, runway in 2019, streets in 21, 22, and 23, on average of about $1.5 million per year. Cascade Bridge shows up in 2024, streets, and then in 25, 26, 27, and 28 at $2 million a year. So kind of looking more at a 10-year cycle now instead of a 5-year cycle. And the goal here was trying to get so that you could lower that levy rate. You can see that off to the left, but I'm going to give that again in a chart. Again, we're going to pay attention to the squiggly line. It gets a little bit harder to see, but it's a blue line that's right around 380 for the next few years. It drops to 340 for 4 years after that, and then from 2028 and beyond, it's at $3. Now, what you're seeing in the other colors on this page, in the light gray, are existing debt payments. The blue represents your new capital that was shown on the prior page, and the orange represents what would be remaining if you were to keep that levy rate. So you can see you actually do build up quite a bit of capacity, but one thing to note is a lot of that's after 2030, when we're not talking about adding new debt on. So, you know, really kind of zero in on those first 10 to 15 years to see what's available. You know, the one thing we like about this debt structure is even once you get out 10 years, then you see a nice declining line, which gives you ability to address capital. Either say, well, we need new capital, so we're going to hold the levy rate steady, or we don't need new capital, so we're going to allow the levy rate to continue to decline. Again, that's a future council decision down the road, but this is things that you can do to kind of set them up for success.
One thing I'd like to note on that, this, again, has modeled in the Cascade Bridge at $6 million in 2024. We really can't afford, or is it 2026?
24.
24. That's getting out where the projects that were done back in 2011, that debt issue that was done then, was really kind of drove, making it difficult to layer in a large significant project with geo debt for quite a while. And once that comes off, it does create a lot of flexibility to start looking at or making some decisions. Well, the council still has a decision. Do you feel, what's the relative worth of doing that project versus a debt service levy at different spots? Again, we're at 380 now. My goal is to try to get it back down to $3. But you may have different goals. You may want to have it higher and be more aggressive with capital projects. Even at $3, you can be a little bit more aggressive with projects after that 2024 time frame than what I've put on there for work to be done. And of course, that's a long ways out, and there may be other things that ultimately come up anyway, but there is some room left beyond that $2 million of street work to do each year, if you want to be at that $3 mark.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that is, you know, if you decided to keep that levy rate at that 380 for the next 10 years, that probably allows you to push Cascade Bridge up to that 2021 timeframe, as opposed to keeping it pushed out. So what we've tried to look is trying to get that levy rate down as a priority. And again, that, you know, you got competing priorities. There always are in government work. So, you know, taxpayers' rates and the projects that they feel are important. So right now, that's about the difference we're seeing. It's always was kind of that 40-cent per year project, and that's kind of what's allowing us to drop it down 5 years out without backloading debt. I guess that would be the key thing to point. We're not going to get into a situation where we're pushing debt payments out to fit in a project to not pass it on to the taxpayers right away. So,
And I appreciate that.
yeah, and this is just one component of the capital plan. There's also new projects shown under TIF revenue support. And again, we can cycle back through this. You know, one thing to note on your tax increment financing areas, and there's a consolidated valuation summary, and there's a reason why, you know, I have, you know, there's a bunch of different amendments. That's a scientific term, bunch of different amendments there. But ultimately, within your urban renewal area, there are certain dates as to which you made amendments to the plan to add projects. And depending on the timing of those amendments and the classification of the projects, there are pieces of valuation or development that automatically roll off what I'd call kind of the TIF valuations onto general fund budget. So ultimately, what you're seeing in this model is, your historic run rate on TIF valuation growth has been about 8%. We're using a number at about 50% of that. So this is a 4% growth model only on the tax increment financing areas. You're gonna see later where we're using more of the historical, 1.7 for total city valuation. But within the urban renewal area, this is showing a 4% valuation growth. Your existing obligations are done in 2025. Really, after the next 4 years are kind of what I call kind of your heavy years in tax increment financing. Then thereafter, they do drop. You're going to see that here in this page here. So I kind of put these together. I didn't give you a separate chart for existing TIF, but again, we kind of got the same interplay: new debt, available debt, but with the goal of really kind of capping off the amount of valuation you're taking with tax increment financing over time, as opposed to allowing that growth to roll onto tax increment financing, allowing that growth then to go to all the taxing entities that cover the city of Burlington, and still showing the ability to cover obligations and projects within that area. Now I'm going to back up and talk about a few of the projects here, and again, I'll just hit these pretty high level. Just Dresser Rand cleanup, Apollo Building, some work at Division Street and Agency Street. All of that through kind of the next year and a half, 2 years. Total on those projects runs around $4 million-ish, a little bit under as far as your borrowing commitment, but with the grants you're receiving, I think the total work is about $4 million. There's a Mount Pleasant Street Bridge shown at $4 million. Potential flood wall project at $7 million. Parking ramp, Recplex improvements, Jefferson Street depot improvements, building demo repair, Washington Street, and industrial park expansion. All of that being covered between now and 2027. So over the next 10 years, approximately $30 million of capital within the tax increment financing area as far as new capital projects. And again, we're talking about essentially limiting the amount and actually being at lower levels than you are right now on your TIF valuation. So all within the existing valuation you're already collecting within the tax increment financing area, including releasing some TIF in the current year. Jim?
The use that is shown here for some of those additional potential projects, like the flood wall at $7 million. When we did the flood mitigation grant at $26.2 million, when we put together the original project, it was more in the, if we were going to run that flood wall along the riverfront continuously from just north of the port all the way down to the sewer treatment plant, that was going to be more like a $33 million project. When we went through a process where we knew we had to negotiate a lower amount, as the board was going to be looking at our project and Des Moines' project and trying to balance out the two different competing applications, we had to make an alteration to that design. So that's where now, the way we're currently set up, it's just north of the port going down just past the lift station, and then it runs east-west inland. What ends up happening with that is you still have, in a major flood event, you still have Main Street getting closed with flood water over it. You still have to put flood protection around the depot. The $7 million additional work, allowing that flood wall to run all the way down to the sewer treatment plant. I mean, the major cost item in that is an additional pump. I think that's about $4.5 million of that. That allows us not to have the floodwater issues that impact Main Street, that impact the depot, There's a benefit for the railroad, true, and there may be the ability to get at least some funding out of the railroad. They've expressed interest in participating tentatively if we were to do something that would protect that. This is identifying that you have the ability to cover that if you so desire to make that modification to that design work. The other amounts that are in here again are really a lot of different what ifs, just to talk about the flexibility of what you have funding to do. $2 million towards parking ramp is a decent chunk, but it's not going to get you very far if the average stall cost is over $30,000. Recplex we threw in there at a $1.2 million, just as much as anything that this hasn't even been brought forward to the council as a discussion point, but there's the ability to talk with the chamber about purchasing some of the land that they don't have the ability to necessarily use for building sites, because they just won't take a load, but they would work very well for a couple of additional soccer fields and some additional parking out there. That 1.2 million is somewhat of an estimate to cover the idea of needing to do a purchase of land, of needing to pay for the pavement for the parking lot, as well as a roadway that would then run where the current roadway entering into the Recplex dead ends, extending it a little bit further south, and then having it make a left-hand jog all the way over to West Burlington Avenue.
That'd be a big change.
So, I mean, that's a good-sized project that we're not in a position, we haven't been in a position to even put up into the CIP discussion yet, and that's going to be something that will come through this year as an item for you to consider. Jefferson Street, thrown in there at $3 million. I just threw that on there that you could put a significant amount of money into revamping all that street frontage. Put in permeable pavers, different pieces that would help out that area for both looks and for flood mitigation efforts. Things that we talked about with green alleys, being able to put permeable pavers there as well. Washington Street is a project that we've tried to get funded through the region STP funds and failed a couple of times, and that's the potential you could look at doing that project here.
That project, I think, finished second or third in scoring.
And may get funded.
So it has a chance again.
Yep.
Apply again.
And you see in here other amounts, the $2 million for the repair of the depot, or no, $2.5 million. Industrial park expansion at $3 million. That's just again throwing a number out there. If to do any significant expansion or development of a new industrial park, you would spend a significant amount of money to get it accomplished. And we have an industrial park that's getting close to full. And there's some concerns from the chamber about how future economic development occurs. They're not in a need this year or next year, but in 10 years, there is going to be a need for some consideration of where does future growth occur. And the final one that's on there is building demo and repair. We spent Dresser Rand site. We're going to be at about $650,000. This is contemplating that you could have other projects occur over the course of the next decade that do some comparable cleanups potentially. You have the flexibility to do all of those within this. You have the flexibility it may not be those projects, but you have comparable projects of like dollar amounts that you can have some discussion about over the next 5 to 10 years. And there's just a lot of room to see some proactive investments done.
And, the best part about this model is that you're not claiming any more TIF income than you're currently taking. So to kind of orient yourself on the chart, the left axis picks up the total payments, the right axis picks up the income amount over time. So you can see that dropping in The current fiscal year, you're collecting almost $2.5 million of income from the tax increment financing area, getting to a point where you're under 2 million and still doing all these projects without increasing your tax asking and actually releasing more funds over time back to the government entities. You know, the way TIF was designed. And one of the things I'll say on this is that we've been quite aggressive on almost all the debt repayment schedules, trying to fit them within 10-year repayments, trying to keep interest costs down so that you're not sitting on 20-year obligations with your tax increment financing area where you're paying for an improvement, you know, almost past maybe the useful life of the valuation coming on. So that you're actually able to realize that benefit on the city's tax roll. You paid off the economic development projects at that point.
One other point that I wanted to make with the TIF valuation. One of the concerns that I have as time goes on is what happens with backfill. Backfill is $340,000 of our general fund. It's another $100,000 in debt service. If that were to go away in 2 or 4 years or whatever the case, there's going to be a dramatic adjustment need to be made in our operating structure. And one of the things that I look at is if you can keep even though we're showing a lot, the potential to do a lot of TIF projects in the out years, it may be that one way to alleviate that hit to the general fund, if it were to happen sometime in the future, is to release a large chunk of TIF value to help you to adjust to that dramatic change to the general fund. Because we just aren't, I don't know where you make an adjustment in the general fund of $340,000. This is a way to try to work through it.
Yeah, the same on the same breath, you know, trying to get that levy structure down in the debt service levy so that, again, backfill doesn't occur. Do you have some other flexibility to try not to bring any sort of tax increase back to the taxpayers? Now, you're thinking proactive. You know, the stickler would say, well, if the state sticks it, let them be mad at their state legislators for not, doing their backfill. But this is something proactive you can do as a council and kind of planning through these items. But,
And the hope would be that that never becomes an issue.
yeah.
And that you can afford to do the projects. But I did want to do something in a way that left something that was a cushion that you could get to if we needed to, if that happened in the future, but also had the flexibility, if it doesn't, you can use it not on a knee-jerk perspective, but on a planned perspective.
And just one quick last comment on this TIF breakdown. You'll notice a couple of the bars, the blue bars are higher than the income, and there's yellow bars remaining that are deficit. That simply means is that you're spending down some of the accumulated orange bars in the early years. So I just wanted to make certain that was clear. Moving on to the next section, just going to talk flood mitigation real quick. I don't know if we haven't, I don't believe, had a conversation at the council level regarding the way we're looking at the flood mitigation. I'm going to apologize, this is a little small. I'm going to blow this up because I don't have a chart associated with this one. And just so it's clear the way that this works, there are intercept revenues at the state level on the sales tax. Sales tax increment, so there's a base level of sales tax generated within the city of Burlington. The state is intercepting some of that sales tax that would otherwise be going to the state funding. This is separate from your local option sales tax. So this is the regular, 6-cent sales tax or 5-cent sales tax that's being paid. Portion that's being intercepted and then being made available for the city to use for specific projects on flood mitigation. You were one of, is it 9? How many cities were granted? I can't remember. Around 9 cities that were granted funds through this program for flood mitigation. You are supposed to receive approximately $26.2 million. That's that third column over from the right. There's a specific cash flow that is anticipated based on the increment. So that's where you're going to see actually, there is some backloading of debt in the structure because That's all you can really do. You're forced to match where your revenues are to be received. There are essentially 4 projects. I have it broken out into 7 different borrowings because of the nature of those projects and the interest rates that could be associated with them. And ultimately, total principal and interest payments over time, just under 26.2 million, funding a total of 22.3 million of projects. Now, the thing that you'll have to note here is that this is a highly interest rate sensitive model. So to the extent that rates are different in 17, 19, 21, and 23 when these projects are occurring, and let's say there are inflation assumptions already built into the projects, we've already accounted for that, but it can change the model slightly. We had different models. I do have what's called a spread over current rates illustrated there. So we're being slightly conservative, but not overly conservative. 22.3 is the total projects being looked at here. I think there's a little bit of wiggle room, but not a ton. So just know that this model is going to be continually updated. If we see interest rates spike and rise, we might be looking at this and showing a cumulative deficit, at which point we're just talking, okay, there's a few, let's say a couple 100,000 we have to come up with somewhere. Is that supported by a debt service levy piece, or is there some tax increment financing, urban renewal revenues that can flow in to backfill this, or some sewer revenues? So you do have some options there, but just know this is all you're going to receive from the state, hopefully. I mean, there's always the chance you get less than what comes from the state as well. So we'll have to continue to monitor these assumptions as we go. But it does show you the ability to fund the entire amount of projects that you currently have designed on your flood mitigation project list.
Just for clarification, this only, this fund only comes from the Burlington area sales tax. It's not a
Correct.
Correct.
statewide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, it's predicated just on local growth in sales tax collections of the state's portion of revenue.
And they've committed to a certain level, and you don't necessarily get all the increment that you generate in a given year. And right now, you do have a little bit of cushion. You generated more than your increment, but you don't get those dollars.
Yeah, they have 50 million allocated annually, and they've apportioned that out to all the different communities. So even though, like this year, I think there was collections that would have made it to where $400,000 could have been released by the formula to the city. In our application, we had $275,000 in this year, and in last year, and that was the maximum they were going to give. And it's nice to know that we have that, had that additional growth, because our sales tax collections vary up and down much more so than what it does on a statewide basis. Mm-hmm. And they expressed a concern about that too when we were in there. But having us be ahead is a major benefit.
Yeah, correct. All right, well, that's a lot of information so far. So I just got a couple kind of summary output metrics. Going to talk a little bit about debt limit. And I'm going to zoom in here just so we got a current picture of your debt limit. And this here is existing debt and retired principal payments. As I slide over, based on your valuation, your constitutional debt limit is 60 million. So remaining about 26 million currently, 56% utilized, the lowest level the city's had in a long time, 43% remaining. As you move forward then, this takes into account the entirety of the models that were built and you've seen in this file. Prior debt retired, new debt issued, new debt retired, new TIF issued, new TIF retired, new flood issued, new flood retired. And then evaluation growth here at 1.1%. So you see a debt limit going above 60 million, but not a out of line growth number for sure. You do see a pocket of years right here. I think that's fiscal 26. Yeah, fiscal 25 and 26 where you
Right.
see that
Yeah.
bump. It's really due to two things. You've now issued all the flood mitigation debt at that time, and you just took on Cascade Bridge. So, the competing interest on, while we're showing you that, well, we got levy room, we have TIF room within our available revenues, we're gonna have the flood mitigation revenues coming in. You still got a debt limit component to manage. This doesn't give me a lot of heartburn, to be real honest. You still have 16 million of emergency debt available, debt issuance ability available. But I just want to point out, that's one of the council's metrics that you're looking at. You've been as high as 80% in the last 5 years, so you've been working your way down from that number. But again, this is with the flood mitigation debt, which in my mind is a little bit of a unique situation. So I did give a sheet of paper that pulls the flood mitigation out. And so you can see with the flood mitigation pulled out, you're not even barely getting over 50% of your debt limit. So that flood mitigation project, the timing, the way that the grant funds are coming, the desire not to do a pay-as-you-go approach and prolong this and wait for the next 500-year flood to come on, but try to be proactive and anticipating those revenues through borrowing does push you over that debt limit, that 70% target that you were set. Again, in chart form, this is what it looks like. Existing debt, your new CIP is in yellow. The gray is your new TIF. The new flood is not shown on this page. It is shown on this second page then. You see the gray of the flood, how that spikes you up. But then over time, you see that gets paid off by 2033, and you're no longer dealing with the flood mitigation debt anymore. It's a rapid repayment schedule as well. Valuation history, I'm going to take just a quick shot through this. And, one of the things that, we've talked about and we've hit on kind of the last time we were talking, the CIP plan had to do with the ability to release tax increment financing revenues. One of the things that you've been limited on, especially with the change in rollback rates and the state law change on residential property, is your growth in taxable valuation within your budget over the last 5 years or 6 years. You had negative 0.42, a year of 4.5% growth, which then averages that out to 2% between those 2 years. And then you had 1.37, 1.17, 0.62, and 0.73. And of course, all of your fixed cost, health premiums, all that stuff just went up by those same percentages. So your budget was simple, and there really weren't any hard decisions to make. Obviously, that's tongue in cheek because you know that didn't happen. So you've dealt with a limited ability to adjust your overall general fund budget, fund government cost. It's not that the city just has an unlimited check that you can raise rates to whatever you feel like. You are bound by Constitution, the dollars that you can claim. So your valuation growth certainly makes a big difference there. The one thing you can't see on this chart is the TIF valuation growth over that same period of time. Had some very significant years of growth, 30%, 3, 10, 7, 9, and 5 for those TIF valuation growth over that same period of time. I'm going to come back to that. So one of the things we're looking at, and again, I'm going to zoom. Let's see if I got a good chart here. We'll go to the chart instead. So if I look at your TIF valuation, what is claimed and released. So if I were to take your current $77 million of valuation that's within your urban renewal area and apply that 4% growth that we talked about, this is the trend line that you would see of valuation from that property. If the city self-limits and only claims revenues, shown in blue, all of this valuation bump here on the chart flows back to the general fund. Now, everything shown in yellow is a natural release. That's going to happen no matter what. What's shown in orange then is what I call more of a voluntary release, because you would be self-limiting on the obligations that you could do. what this results in then is a trend line that allows the city to have a more robust growth rate in your general fund budget. So if we take your taxable valuation growth, your historical average, and we're looking at 1.69%, which is actually a little bit below your 10-year average. And so I grew the entire valuation by the city at those levels. But then I allowed your general fund budget to pick up the difference on what you're releasing in the tax increment financing areas. And what you see, if you chart this blue line here, this number here is your general fund budget growth. And you can see it starts out at 3% next year. With only, even if your valuations grew at 1.69%, by releasing the TIF, you have the effective ability to grow your general fund by almost 3%.
That's releasing $10 million of value.
$10 million of value. And then from there, it settles in closer to 1.8%. You see some years where it spikes because you had natural release. So in this year, you get a 2.5% growth mark in that year. And again, trying to time, could that valuation growth be coming online at the same time that you're perhaps facing some state pressure on backfill? So in allowing yourself to, again, release some of that TIF to grow that valuation. But even then, the long-term trend line is closer to 1.9 instead of the 1.6 that you're seeing on your overall valuation. In other words, kind of taking the growth from the tax increment financing area and allowing that to flow to all the taxing entities. So this isn't just a benefit for the city, this also flows through to the county, and it flows through to the school districts as well. So, there are some other benefits outside of your own budget. So we're looking at it in that lens, obviously, tonight. So the effect really of releasing that $10 million of valuation, and this is a complicated chart, to say the least, but really it adds about $125,000 to your general fund budget immediately, without factoring in any growth. That's $125,000 that the city has in your general fund budget that you didn't have this year, just by releasing those tax increment financing revenues. Now you are giving up, approximately $330,000 of TIF value for that trade-off, but it looks like your cash flow is going to be able to handle that. That difference between those two numbers, that flows back to the school district, the county, and the community college as well. Here's just some math behind how that breakout looks. Again, there's these charts. I guess that's all. That's high level. There's a little bouncing around, but it's a little bit more of a kind of big picture. What could Burlington be in 10 years discussion? These type of capital project levels that you can obtain while maintaining your level. We've been saying that this will set you up for future success. Taking these steps now will give you financial flexibility in the future. And this is kind of the fruition of that and kind of putting the numbers to paper.
When we did the budget this last year, in order to cover ongoing operating costs and what it would take to make the general fund work, that model on a 5-year basis looked at the need to have this $10 million released to maintain current operations. And I haven't seen anything different in the last year that says that isn't the case. Our property tax revenue just does not grow at a pace that matches our costs without releasing some TIF value. And at some point, you want your TIF to be able to release some value. So we've already taken this into account for this next year's budget.
Yeah, and to just kind of dispel the notion like, well, why haven't we done this before? Well, this is really about the first or second year your TIF has actually cash flowed your obligations. Prior to that, it was not cash flowing your obligations. So.
Yeah. In 2012, we had $2 million of deficits.
I forget all the numbers at this point.
There's $1 million in both the downtown and out in
that sounds about right.
Industrial Park.
Correct. Well, I guess the other thing I will hit is, really with this in place, there are some financing timelines we'll be talking about, probably looking towards the spring again. You probably have some internal stuff on the tax increment financing area here later this month to look for. We are currently looking at a refinancing opportunity for the spring on one of your debt issuances that become callable. So expect that to come forward. As far as locking in those interest rates, those bonds become callable in June. The earliest that you can then close that financing and still be a current refunding is receiving money around March 1. So back up from that a few weeks, you could probably be locking in rates on that debt in February to hopefully take advantage of what is still a low interest rate environment, or maybe we hope it's not a low interest rate environment for other reasons. But from the standpoint of issuing city debt, perhaps it's still a low interest rate environment at that time. We have started doing some of the sewer planning work. Still kind of waiting for hard numbers. This is not a lot has changed. As hard numbers come in, we'll be looking at the rates again. But I don't anticipate any major adjustments from what we've discussed in the past, primarily inflationary increases since your rate structure is in place. So, Jim,
Yeah,
did I miss anything?
only other thing I'd mention is Stephanie will be bringing over, as you kind of alluded to it, over the next, I think the next meeting, we have to do our, we have a couple of projects that are annual appropriations. The Fairway Center was one of those. Grow Greater Burlington, when they did the sale of their spec building, was one of those. And I don't think the Manor site this year is, I don't think until next year do we have an annual appropriation on that one. But that has to be done yet this month. We're gonna be looking to certify some, or debt, and I don't know exact procedures on this, but with the dresser and cleanup, we need to make sure that we have ourselves in a position to use TIF funds to cover the debt on that, and we might be having action on the Division Street rise and possibly maybe the Agency Street rise, depending on when we have to do things. If we need to get something done yet this year, we'll be having to get that accomplished by November 1. So the second meeting in the month. December 1, sorry. The second meeting in November, we'll have to have that occur. And I think that's it, outside of any questions that you have. A lot of this with the TIF is, as much as anything, giving you a backdrop to where we're talking about not using all of our TIF valuation this upcoming year, and also looking more long-term for you to be able to see that we have an awful lot of flexibility for what potentially happens for projects there.
And I will get you all the electronic copy of the new pieces with the chart. So that was hot off the press. I was running out the door printing it today. So again, I'm not real great at charts, so it takes me a while. So that's why you didn't have it for your packet.
But you're good with numbers.
Thank you very much.
Travis, I want to thank you for all the help you've been to us. And thank you, Jim, for helping us be on top of this thing. Anything else, Council, about this? Ready to move on?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Travis.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, let's move back to the regular agenda. First item is a public hearing, consideration of sale of property locally known as 117 South 7th Street. And Eric, what do you have to say about that?
This is a property the city acquired, and show a map here up on the overhead. Net can switch it over. Through the abandoned building program, the property was demolished. The church directly adjacent to it to the west has submitted a bid to purchase the property. 2 or 3 years ago, they purchased the property from the city at 131 South 7th as well, and we did send notice to neighbors as well and had no other interest at this time, so it is listed in the resolution as a sale to the St. John and Paul Church for $100.
Comments? Okay.
Me.
Public hearing, consideration of permanent encroachment agreement with Greenway of Burlington Associates for encroachment into Valley Street right-of-way at 2312 Valley Street.
This is one, the former Greenway, as it's Stone Gardens now, had some discussions about looking to make some improvements at their property, primarily related to security. And it was proposed to have a gate or street closure, similar to the one, I guess the sketch shown here at the bottom, on Valley Street as it leads out to Flint Hills Drive. Had some initial discussions on that, brought forward to the council, but there are some differing recommendations on that. One being the maintenance, snow maintenance, with the gate there, it would just be pushed towards the center of the gates, which would restrict some fire access, emergency access. So there are some concerns about having this there as a permanent gate closure. Even if there were access or key to it, could create some issues for maintenance and access to the site. So staff did not recommend approval from that standpoint, but based on the request, it is being brought forward to the council for consideration. But the major comments or issues would be the snow removal may create some issues for access into the site, now creating an issue or a situation where there's only one access off of Shield Street, and that being a concern.
I guess from the other side on that, from a police department perspective, well, actually, could that get addressed both from a police department perspective and from a fire perspective in terms of what your department's mentioned for?
Yeah, actually, it's probably been even a couple of years ago now, and the folks at the old Greenway where that used to be, they approached us and said, hey, what do you think about closing off access to Flint Hills Drive, and how would that help our situation out here with cars coming and going that really didn't have any business being there? And they've started a gate pass thing at the front gate, and then we pondered that and did a little bit of research and thought, you know, that would probably be a pretty good idea. And from our perspective, I still think it's a pretty good idea, but in discussing it with staff and with the fire department, I don't know if that risk is gonna be worth the reward of what we're trying to accomplish here. So it's kind of, we're not really at odds with it. It's just a request that was brought forward, and there's some very, very valuable things as part of the request, but there's some things that could be very detrimental too, with fire safety, ambulance safety, snow removal, and those kind of things. So, you know, they wanted to bring it forward. It's a good proposal in one respect, like I said, but there's certainly some concerns, and we are open to all those concerns. We don't want to create something that causes an unintended consequence, I guess, is what we're saying.
Right.
Okay? Thanks.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, I think Eric pretty much hit on I wouldn't call it an objection. Probably 90% of the year we'd be fine with it. They're gonna provide some kind of either a Knox box or some way that we could access through that gate. But there are gonna be times of the year, and I think Eric had actually talked to him about the snow removal. That was how snow removal would be done. And also, with the gate there, one other worry is that people will just use that as a parking area for their cars and end up, because normally, we wouldn't use that for an access, so, that's where we're at as a fire department, so.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So, bottom line, Eric, that your recommendation is?
Like, just based on the discussion, was not to move forward with the proposal as presented, maybe look at other options or.
Okay.
But we looked at all concerns and realized there are positives to doing it as well, but are there other ways maybe to accomplish that?
The difficult part is that we know that they're trying to promote the safety and of the residents and make sure that they run as well as possible. And there are good reasons for them to want to do it, and it's hard to say that there are things that we have objections with. But there are.
I understand. So looking at this map, Eric, the only access then, Valley doesn't go through over to Shields, does it?
No, the only access would be on Washington Street over to Shields.
Yeah. Okay. Council, anything else?
Nothing here.
No? Tim? No? Okay. All right, thank you. The third reading of an ordinance amending section 15007, fixing numbers, chapter 150, building numbering, City of Burlington Municipal Code. I assume there's no changes in that? No. Reason we wanted to go to three readings, just to get it out in front of the people? Okay. Number 5, motion for preliminary adoption of a second reading of ordinance creating the Chapter 38 Tree Advisory Board. I just assume there's no change in that.
Nope.
Are we okay to waive that one? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, can we do that, please? Number 6, resolution approving the preliminary plat for the 6th addition to Stonegate Crossing subdivision.
This is for the property south of Mason Road, east of Roosevelt. This aerial image doesn't show, but Dunn Brothers Coffee is at the northwest corner of the site, and Lawrence Drive extends partially into the site as well. But this preliminary plat lays out the remaining portion of the lot. With the Dunn Brothers in the northwest corner already having been platted. This is 6 additional lots with Lawrence Drive extending further south. A couple of components of the subdivision would be at least laying out the framework for a possible private or frontage road or access through the site, lining up with Sequoia Drive further east on Mason Road, and then Lawrence Drive coming further south. One note or condition on this was our code does require a cul-de-sac at the end of dead-end drives where where they won't connect to other roads in the future. Based on this being a commercial development and the short size of Lawrence Drive, they propose putting in a hammerhead design that meets the fire department turnaround specifications. There will be multiple driveways and parking lots within this that'll afford opportunities for turnaround as well, but that is shown at the southern end of Lawrence Drive there and is listed in the resolution for that. The subdivision would follow all the requirements of the D-Wall Plaza PUD that was previously approved and amended, including the height requirements being adjacent to the airport. Those are all within the PUD language and already addressed through that process. So again, platting 6 additional lots, preliminary platting, allowing for future final platting of that, and with the idea or concept of a private frontage road connecting over to Sequoia Drive to provide access for the remaining lots. Part of the PUD states that each individual lot would not have direct access onto Mason Road, being an arterial street.
Yeah.
So they would have access off of that.
Off the frontage.
Yep.
Okay. Okay?
Yes,
Any-
good for me.
Okay, thank you. Next is a resolution approving the preliminary plat of the Arborview Estates.
This is the preliminary plat that follows pretty well in line with the rezoning that occurred in July of this year for the Arborview Estates PUD. This shows access off of Cliff Road into the site with a cul-de-sac turnaround on the east end and a public roadway going to the north, connecting to the property at the north end of this that's under separate ownership, which would allow for future road connection within that development as well. The lots on the north side of the roadway are all single-family lots, about 4/10 to over a half acre in size. The lots on the southern side of the roadway are single-family attached structures. So essentially individual duplex structures where each half of the structure is on its own individual lot and individually owned. Through the PUD that was approved, it stated a maximum of 14 attached units within the development on the southern border of the development. The attached housing shall be on lots no less than 7,000 square feet, and lot width shall be a minimum of 50 feet. That meets the requirements of the PUD. The combined lot size for each whole structures over 15,000 square feet. And just for reference, in an R2 zone, to have a duplex structure, the minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet. So that was considerably larger than what a R2 zoning district would be required for a duplex structure. As noted in the packet, there's some discussion on the roadway and alignment for this. The Planning Commission made a recommendation to place a cul-de-sac approximately 850 feet on this north-south roadway. They felt it was a compromise between having the roadway connect to the north and also the code requirements for the 750 foot maximum distance for that our zoning code calls out for a dead-end roadway where a cul-de-sac's at the end of the street. The fire department did have some concerns about the roadway length being over 750 feet from the fire code standpoint. Development department, based on our zoning code, it states streets open at only one end shall have a maximum length of 750 feet in length measured along the center line of the roadway. Street layouts within the subdivision shall allow connections to adjacent land in order to provide adequate street connections for through traffic routes. And streets shall be installed with due regard to the present and foreseeable needs of the area to be subdivided and into the location and capacity of existing streets. So our code doesn't specifically address streets, how long a street can be where it connects to an adjacent property. This is approximately 990 feet. Our code does say where a street is open at only one end, where there is a dead-end road with no possibility for future connection, it's to be 750 feet in length. But the fire code does have some provisions on road length as well, and anything over 750 feet requires special approval. So there's been some discussion on that and what's appropriate to allow this future connection. Looking at the property to the north, map here that was in the packet, there is the ability to provide some connections, not that this would be the actual connection, but there is a large lot to the north that could open up the possibility to allow this. The white road is what's shown in the Arby View Estates, some sort of connection on the north that would allow 2 access points in and out of the subdivision. The current owner has not expressed any desire to develop that property at this time, but looking at future possibilities and planning for future road connections, it makes sense to at least provide that opportunity to connect this road up to that future development site. So I think that covers most of the comments. The fire department, we did have some discussion with them. One alternative they recommended was having the homes on the north side of the cul-de-sac. These 4 homes, lots 18, 19, 16, 17, 18, and 19 have be installed with residential sprinklers based on being at a dead-end site over 750 feet in length. So that was one alternative that was recommended from the fire department. I don't know if I covered everything or kind of went back and forth a little bit there, but.
And you had a compromise, I'm sorry, you covered the compromise at P&Z.
The P&Z, their recommendation was 850 feet have a cul-de-sac, which doesn't meet anyone's code standards. They made that recommendation based on the concerns from the fire department and then from, I guess, what's put forward by the developer and development department's recommendation to have a connection. Doesn't really lead to any optimal development pattern because it would have a cul-de-sac here with an outlot that leaves lot undeveloped, no road connection constructed, and then the possibility of connecting that road connection in the future, somewhat financially unfeasible and development unfeasible based on the remaining property already being developed. So they felt it was a compromise, but staff feels that it's not appropriate based on just denying future connection to this roadway and also not meeting the code standards and provisions of our zoning code to allow for future connections.
just as I've talked with Eric and knowing where the fire department is on this, in an ideal world, everything would develop at one time, but to leave it to where it can develop over a period of time, potentially in the long run, and avoid as many dead ends as possible, it would make sense to allow it to be developed with that roadway extension to the north. I think you talked about that having a hammerhead,
Yeah,
which I
temporary-
don't really understand at all what that is.
Allowing it for temporary turnaround at the north end where fire vehicles or other service vehicles could have a proper turnaround, and whether it's right at the northern end or further down in the lot.
I mean, realistically, when the property owner to the north doesn't have an interest at this point to have development occur, you're looking at a what-if of how do you look at things over a 20 or 30-year time frame to make sure you've left options open. Leaving options open over a 20 or 30-year time frame, it would make sense to make it to where that road could extend if and when you have a property owner who does have a desire to see the development occur over there and not have multiple dead ends.
And that's a goal of the development department of the fire department, of having multiple access points into developments. And you see a lot of individual developments on Cliff Road, Irish Ridge, that were developed just with their own property in mind. And so you have a lot of cul-de-sacs, some shorter, some more lengthy, that don't have the opportunity to connect in the future and can create some issues.
But the council has some level of decision-making here to make as to which recommendation are you going with? Are you going with the fire department's look at code that says the 750 is the maximum length that it should be? Do you look at their proposal where you have the further development occur, but you are requiring the homes to be sprinkled on the end, which actually would be to somewhat with what the development's concern is, making sure that you have that development occur in a way that allows future potential development to happen. Do you go with the compromise from P&Z, which doesn't really seem to meet anyone's desires, it's just a compromise? Or do you go with some other alternative? And you may say that you allow the development the way the developer had brought it forward and not have this requirement for sprinklers on those last 4 lots. And I really don't know where you go if that's kind of where you're looking at, whether to sprinkle those or not, how you make that ultimate determination between having it occur or not having it occur. We did do a requirement with Sicer's development.
Zager.
Zager, I'm sorry, different one. When Steve brought his proposal forward here, actually I guess he brought that over a period of multiple years. But when you ultimately decided that, you did require him to sprinkle that, and I guess a difference in that scenario was there was a maximum number of units to be served with one single entry point that one was exceeding. This doesn't exceed that maximum number, but it does exceed the distance for.
Came into play because of the 30, yeah. That one came into play based on the 30 units over the distance.
Right, and I think that the 4-unit sprinklers was actually a compromise on our part to say it's not over the units, but it's definitely over the 750 feet. I think, as Eric said, the 750 feet says with special permission. I think the permission is, either something like that, residential sprinklers to limit your risk. I mean, that's what we're looking at when you go over 750 feet, is the risk is greater. The other thing would be if there's a foreseeable future of the road actually going through. So I guess that's in your court to decide, is that something we're gonna see in the foreseeable future, that the road actually goes through. So if that was the case, if we look on there and said, yeah, I think it's gonna go through in the next 5-10 years, then we would say, that would be something you would say with special permission to go over the 750 feet, so, yeah.
Okay.
We didn't pull the sprinkler thing out, just made that up. That is actually in there, like Jim was saying, for something
Right.
over the,
I know, we
the
talked
number
about
of
that
units with the Zager property.
yeah. And also with Scott Peck over there by Blackhawk School, we talked about that.
Right.
Scott, do you have any comments, or can I ask you if you have any thoughts on this?
I'm glad that we're looking at different avenues or ways of making this work.
Can you tell people who you are?
I'm Scott Zeiser, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm the developer of this property. It was been in the family a long time. We've taken this land that has no use and turning it into a residential area that is needed on the north side of town. But I think we've even talked about, Eric and I, maybe, I don't know if this would work, enforce or reinforce a driveway so the fire department, if they got in there, they could back into this driveway, kind of like a hammerhead, but it's not a hammerhead. It's just a way that they could get back out and then get back on the street again. I don't have an objection at all if we would make a recommendation that these lots would have to have sprinkler system in it. I think, talk to some people, there's cost to it, but I think the size of the lot and the homes that are gonna be on this lot, they can probably afford that, you know, those type of things. It's not gonna be where they're pinching just to get the sprinkler system in there. So I really like to see someday that this development to the north happens, but right now, there's no answer for you on when it will happen. So what are we gonna do in that time frame to make these 4 lots sellable,
Yeah.
is what it is,
Right.
basically.
Right.
So, and that's, it really needs, those 4 lots are really important to this whole subdivision. I mean, it's the whole package, so
Right.
that's what we're trying to sell, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Any other
Okay.
questions?
No, that's,
Okay.
okay, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that's the answer then, the sprinkler is on those 4 lots.
Yeah.
Seems like that's the answer. You okay?
I've got no problem with that. I would still like to see the hammerhead put in so that there's,
So turnaround,
Way
there's
for
gotta
the-
be some way for a turnaround, for sure.
the trash trucks that are gonna be there every week, and I just hate seeing them having to back down the streets.
Does that sound
There is a temporary turnaround, that might be changed, the location based on the final plat, but you see up here, there's a note that says it's a easement for turnaround is shown on this preliminary plat. and
Okay.
The actual location, based on maybe driveways or other things, will be, we can work that out through the final plat process.
Good. Okay. Is that satisfactory?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I see it now. Well, This is too awesome to have 2 developments come forward in Burlington, Iowa on a given night, commercial and residential like this.
Yeah.
Just, it's amazing that this is happening.
It's great, isn't it? All right, so we're satisfied?
Yes, yes.
I think I am. I think we got a good compromise there. Okay. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Mike. Scott.
All right, tell us about the communication thing, Stephanie.
Sure. So I guess just a little history on our phone system at City Hall. And if Rich was here, he'd probably be able to give it to you a little bit better. But I think for the last 5 years, we've been out. They don't make our phones anymore. We're kind of if we need a phone, we have to find it on eBay. So the company doesn't support our system anymore. So this is a need we've had for a while. We just have not had the budget to move forward with it. So it is in the budget for this year. So we started the process of an RFP, and as you can see in the resolution, we did our first RFP, and it was due back the end of September. The IT steering committee is what heads up this project. So at our last meeting, we went through the RFPs. We had a lot of questions. We needed a couple of the vendors to resubmit, so we decided just to throw all the bids out and go for a second request for RFPs. And we are a little more specific in this one, asked, so we could compare things better.
The IT steering committee is something that was established 3 years ago.
Yes.
and really it kind of stemmed out of a need to really revamp how our infrastructure was done. We had significant issues within our infrastructure. We weren't funding at the level that we needed to. We wanted to redo how we looked at bringing it up to standards, but we also needed to build better communications between our departments. We have an IT group that consists of 2 people, and we have competing needs from all of our departments for software, for hardware, for the infrastructure that supports all of it. And I think there was a lot of miscommunication in terms of what were priorities, and we needed to get everybody within the city on the same speed in terms of how does IT, or how are they prioritizing the different workloads that needs to occur in all the different areas. And it's been an area where we have representation from each department that brings their concerns. They're the champion within their department that bring for the police, as an example, whoever's the person that sits on the IT board is supposed to be the champion for them as a department. Any issues that are come up within the department can flow through them. As things are being done, they can communicate back to their department what's going to be occurring, not just within their building, but on a citywide basis. So that's the group then was tasked when it came to the phone upgrade. How do we make sure that we're addressing all the needs for the city as a whole, all the different departments?
So we're talking about every city building, every department,
Every phone.
everything altogether for $68,000.
Yes. So we also did, it's probably going on a year and a half now, we did contract with RSM, which was McGladrey at the time, to do a telecom assessment. And that's where they came in and looked at, they went and interviewed every department, kind of got us together a plan on what we really need. And so from that, a year and a half later, we're to the RFP.
Actually, we did tentative bids a year ago and discovered we couldn't afford what we were looking to do.
Yeah,
so.
they were too high. So we've learned a lot through this process. A lot of the details Rich and IT would know. But basically on the second page, or Exhibit A of the resolution, recaps the bids that we did receive back last week. There were 6 of them. There are a few different systems that were bid out. Chevy, Ford, that's kind of how we compare them. A lot of them, the main features we want, they all have them. We did really like the Mitel system. It has a lot of great features that we don't currently have now in our system. So we are recommending the Tri-City Electric, which is Tri-City Telecom also. They're out of the Davenport area. But they came in with the lowest bid at that $68,000. Now, we have an amount budgeted that's higher than the $68,000, but along with all this, the changeover, and again, this is some more IT stuff that's a little over my head, but we do need to buy some computer switches, and those are probably another $15,000 to $20,000 on top of this. So we do have budgeted about $100,000 for this conversion for the whole telecom system. So this is a part of it. We do need to upgrade the back-end computer items also with this, so.
Okay.
Long overdue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does anybody have any specific questions or any more information you want?
This is completely off the wall, but does this allow City Hall telephone rings? Can you transfer it to your cell phone?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big one that will, I forget what term do they use, does anybody remember from that meeting? What do they call that when it's not switching? Yeah, I can't remember. It's not forwarding, there's a specific, yeah, so.
Good.
But yeah, we had a demonstration of that system too, and I think everyone is pleased with it.
Okay.
And this will take a few months to roll out. I mean, we're excited to get started once it's approved next week to get the meetings rolling and the kickoff, but it'll probably be a good 3 months before it's all said and done.
Just what Jim needs, more stuff coming on his cell phone, right? Okay. Along with
It's
Eric.
actually just what Rich needs, more things to
Yeah,
have to implement.
yeah,
so.
that's true. Along with Nick and his staff. Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. All right, the last one on the regular agenda is contract for engineering services for the Mount Pleasant Street Bridge.
Before you is a resolution approving the resolution, or the contract, I apologize, with Stanley Consultants to do the design work for Mount Pleasant Street Bridge. As two of you know, you were part of an RFQ process back in late August where we scored several proposals. Stanley Consultants was a clear favorite amongst the average. So in the contract, we are approving, this resolution will approve $333,000 and $333.10 worth of not to exceed contract to do basic services worth of design. Another feature that you also see in there is $18,000 worth of optional services for aesthetic design work. And I have some pictures up there.
And that if I could get the computer.
Could you go to the pictures of the other bridges first? So this is the West Avenue Bridge that we see here. And then this is the Washington Central Street Bridge. I presume that they were of similar aesthetic, pulling from one to the other. And then this is Highway 34. And so as you go up Osborne, you will see Mount Pleasant Street Bridge beyond that. And so the question that we have is one of the main decisions that probably needs to be made is what do we want to do for the Mount Pleasant Street Bridge? Deciding now on the contract whether or not we would like to do some sort of aesthetics to the bridge. And a representative from Stanley is here to maybe answer some of those questions, what it does to the overall cost of the bridge, which is estimated at about $5 million. Could you pull up those other images, and I'll let Larry talk about them a little bit. I believe that the rustic texture is probably the most similar to what you see. These are DOT prototypes. That's probably the closest aesthetic look that you have to those other bridges, but I'll let Larry talk a little bit about some of the aesthetics.
I'm Larry Santos. I'm a structural engineer with Stanley Consultants. I'll be your project manager for this project. What my understanding from the project in the beginning was that the city was pretty cost sensitive, so we proposed to do a very standard DOT type bridge with 2 lanes of traffic through a turning lane and like a 10-foot sidewalk on the bridge for a cross section. Nick asked after our initial meeting that we come up with some aesthetic details, and I've seen the, you showed some examples of aesthetics on city bridges. That's an option. That's more or less a form liner. You would have to decide as a council and as a department how you are, whether you like the performance and the look of those. I offer you for tonight just some examples that we've been familiar with the Iowa DOT. I've had some familiarity with a couple of these. These just add a little bit of subtle shading and form liner elements to a standard DOT bridge. It's what the DOT tells us to do in terms of cost, in terms of planning and budgeting, is assume if you were going to exercise any of these options, it would add about 3% to the construction cost of your project.
3%.
Be 5.1 5.15 if you're assuming the $5 million estimate.
The base contract, you would be doing two base
That's correct.
alternatives. Are they represented in the 5 pictures up here or no?
Those were some aesthetic details we got from the DOT, and they're fairly generic for highway grade separation structures, mostly in a rural setting. We would give you 2 alternatives of pretty much bridge basic, and if you elected to go forward with an aesthetic alternative, we could apply some aesthetics to bridge basic. More, I guess it was more envisioned in the alternatives that it would be more along the lines of functional distinctions, you know, steel or concrete, 4 spans versus 5, as opposed to
The placement of where you have the
that would be the
piers.
major. At that time, you would make, you know, what is keeping outside of the railroads right of way, keeping away from utilities. Those would be, in my mind, the things that you would see in the 2 alternatives that we present to council. The aesthetic standards could be added after that selection. That's one of the reasons the DOT has come up with these things. Is they tried to standardize a response when local municipalities and counties ask for these kinds of things.
So that, am I understanding this correctly, we don't need to make a decision right now. All we're doing is approving the contract and then come back with a design and then we make decisions then, is that correct?
Yeah, I guess I didn't understand when I saw the contract in front of me that was an option to add that later. I would, if I would take some time to think about it more than anything, so I would,
Yeah.
I guess that's my recommendation, is maybe hold that in your back pocket until that time comes for an aesthetic design.
Now, in terms of timing on things, entering into a contract now, you'd be looking for basic bridge design. When would you be hoping to be able to be in a position to be able to go out to bid?
According to the RFP, we're basing everything off of a April of 2018 letting, Iowa DOT Office of Local Systems. So that, if you back that up using their letting calendar, that you'd be making these decisions in the spring of next year.
Whether to go with some of the options on what it looks like.
Right, that's correct.
Okay.
So as we go through the budget season, you're probably gonna want to make a decision. Do you want to look at the option of spending an extra $150,000 on this project?
Right.
And then by then, we might have a better cost estimate as to what the overall cost of the bridge would be.
Yeah.
That sounds reasonable.
Anything?
Well, I was too busy doing math in my head to think here.
Oh, okay.
About what's the question?
Well, the decision on aesthetics and bridge design, et cetera, comes later. What we're just doing is approving the contract, giving him permission to get started and get going on it. Yeah.
Right. I'm not interested in the aesthetics because of the other bridges that we have down there, the other competing
Right there in the
designs
same
we
area.
have.
Yeah, that's probably
And
true.
I'm really not interested in seeing a lot of decor under there, especially seeing how there's not a lot of traffic underneath there
Yeah, you know, that's a good point. That's a good point,
that
yeah.
people are
That's-
gonna see, so.
It's gonna be something that the 5 of you are gonna have to make a decision on, though, at some point.
Yeah.
So,
That's a really good point. Keep that in mind.
And about 3% is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
Anything else?
No, I mean, other than next week, for the other 2 members, if I probably will bring up similar images to keep that in mind.
Sure.
For as far as a decision on what you would like to do, whether you'd like to make it now or in the future.
Well, the decision to be made now is whether we spend the $18,000 on
Aesthetics.
looking at aesthetic designs or not, correct?
yep.
That would be,
Or build it.
that would be the design, if you, the cost the cost of $18,000 would be to implement one of the 5.
Yep, if you don't have to make that's something that you can make a decision now as you're approving a contract. You can make that next spring as you're deciding, do you want to look at those options or not? If you want to go through that process, you're gonna spend that extra 18,000
That would
of
be the
design
full
work.
design. That 18,000 would be the full design cost.
Yeah.
And then the additional roughly 3% of construction would be the construction cost of implementing the design.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. Good?
Thank you.
Thanks. While you're there, would you like to introduce your new
Yep.
person?
If you'd like to stand up. We hired a new individual in our engineering department. This is Bob Wright, our new engineering manager. I don't know if you'd like to say a few words.
Yeah, welcome.
No,
Bob.
no,
Welcome,
it's
Bob.
it's a pleasure to be here, and week 2, so looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Where'd you come from?
I was at the Iowa ammunition plant there for the last three and a half years. Prior to that, my background's been in program management, product development, project management, so.
And what makes Bob Bob?
Oh, I guess I think passion for engineering and design, and so looking forward to certainly this bridge and many others. So I'm electrical engineer by trade, electronics, controls, but all engineering. So
Yeah.
that's what I enjoy.
Good.
Well,
So-
hopefully we'll get to see a lot of you here in the next
Yeah,
few years.
definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice to meet
Thank
you.
you, Bob.
Do you have some other changes that are gonna be going on within the engineering department here too?
Yes, we will be, our new city engineer will start November 14th. So we kind of went through a bit of a reorganization due to a lack of projects moving forward at a ideal pace. A reorganization was thought of and letting a city engineer do design work rather than managing a set of staff. So that's the reason why we brought Bob in as the engineering manager rather than, putting a less responsibility of the management of staff on the city engineer and more
Good.
underneath Bob.
Makes sense.
Good. You're there to talk about the release of retention monies.
Correct, I am. Mazel is phase 1 on this. The budget was $772,000, came in at $617,000. There were some liquidated damages assessed. Everything went okay as far as I know. Most of the project was done before I got here, but
Good.
You okay with that on the consent agenda?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm okay too.
Yeah.
All right, the only thing left on the agenda is to set date for public hearings, and we have 5 of those. Various sections of electrical code, ordinances for plumbing code, ordinances for zoning code, consideration of the property, sale of property at 503 Summer, and sale of property at 227 South 9th. Those are all on set public hearings for November 21st. And I don't think there's any appointments, is there? Or did I miss something there? I don't remember seeing anything. Let me get to the end here and I'll see.
Eric, chapter 170, that's on
Page 115.
Oh, there we are.
existing, or,
Yeah, there's multiple parts to that. One's existing non-conforming structures. That's one component of that.
great. That one's probably gonna be one of the most important topics, other than the budget that we've discussed in our
Which one are you
4-year.
talking about? No, I'm sorry.
Chapter 170.
170 zoning code,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, that was the zero lot line. Okay. Yeah, there is one. Is there one?
2.
Christine
2.
Roberts for
I'm good with both of them.
City Planning Commission.
City Planning Commission.
And then, yes, David Davis had resigned, and you have
Connor Brakefield.
the zoning board of adjustment.
City Board of Commissions. Okay. Are you all right? You said you're okay. All right. You okay, Bob?
Yep.
All right. Eric, you have anything else? Nick or Chief, do you have anything else? Mr. Scott?
Nope.
Mr. Fleming?
No. Hey, no.
I've just been driving around town and just noticing how beautiful Burlington is right now. It's gorgeous. If you really want to, yesterday we were out walking, if you go up Main Street, turn to west on Harrison, come to Central and come north on Central, it is beautiful.
It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous. Mr. Furneaux?
a couple of things. I guess I'm doing the radio on Wednesday. Other chief had left, 6 o'clock. Is that trunk or treat? What is it? Is that what you call that now?
No, trunk or treat.
Safe holiday. Trunk or treat was last Friday, wasn't it?
That was yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Boy, these kids are getting a lot.
But yes, down the auditorium is going on right now. That is a phenomenal event if you haven't had a chance to go down and see it. The big thing, I guess, for us, we had sent to you, and we sent out a press release, and actually the EPA had forwarded on information in regards to, we had an announcement that they awarded us $150,000 to begin a process of doing some integrated planning. They are beta testing a product. We're one of 5 communities nationally that they selected to do this with. They're trying to do some interactive online assessment tools that they can plug data into as we go through the integrated process. What this will allow us to do, this will be done in partnership. They have someone already selected who will do the contract work on the planning. This will require input from us. It will require some coordination with the state DNR. They will take a look at where this fits with us. Our consent order work is a major piece of what needs to happen over the next few years. But the state also has concerns about how they meet mandates from a federal level for nitrate and phosphate removal. We have system requirements or needs with just basic plant upgrades, system upgrades that need to occur on a community-wide basis. Integrated planning is designed to take a look at all of these different needs, what we need to do for stormwater control maintenance in general, making sure that we can proactively over the course of not just the next 2 to 3 years or just looking at the CSO requirements, but how do we look at everything and plan in on a cost-effective manner and prioritize these different competing needs that our system has. What they've talked about from a statewide basis, typically we operate our sewer treatment plant has a 5-year, dang it, what do you call the?
Permitting process.
Yeah, the permit, and we just received our new permit for the next 5 years. What they will do over time is take a look at how do we change that 5-year permit process into more of a planned or negotiated process with the state that's more like a 15-year.
Wow.
So that we can, so that we don't have to go through a 5-year renewal where you now have a whole brand new set of requirements. We don't know exactly how this will all play out, but we are excited to see how we can use this in a way that allows us to have a little bit more control over the mandates and requirements that we have on our system and still work in the things that we need to have occur for capital improvements on an ongoing basis. One of the things that they did talk with us about as we were on there is not only is this assistance that they're looking at for this initial plan, but how can they help us as we identify needs that we have? How can they help us to find funding sources to make some of this happen over a period of time too?
That'll be helpful.
So we're very optimistic that this will be a good thing for us as a community. And again, we're one of 5 communities on a national basis, and that's a big deal. So.
All right.
And it really speaks to, the CSO order is not something that we've found to be fun. I don't think anyone finds dealing with that fun.
Yeah.
But we're trying to do our best to be a good partner, and where we have mandates that come down from a federal and state level, how do we work to do it in a way that is proactive, not digging our feet in the sand, but still tries to do our best to keep our local community in mind so that we don't have rates go completely out of control. So,
Okay.
I think that's it for what I had.
Okay, thank you, council, thank you, staff.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Shema.